Students.
Imagine the doors that could open every day.
If students could learn from people in their community.
A group of us, educators and social, that is why we created Community Share.
So if you guys were to close your eyes right now, just close your eyes and go back in time and think about Arizona a long, long time ago.
As a principal, I would like to expose my students to every opportunity. As a school, teachers are often looking for connections and bringing the real-world application into the classroom, but it can be overwhelming on who to connect with.
In this partnership with Kate Hodges, our goal was to have the kids learn about their Arizona roots, the history of Arizona, and also to have the kids kind of like investigate their own family roots, where they come from. When we supplement that learning with a community share partner, can't be better than that.
Community Share is an initiative that is reimagining the relationship between our communities and our schools. Through our online platform, Community Share matches the skills, passions, and expertise of individuals and organizations with the needs and goals of educators in Arizona. Teachers create online profiles indicating the expertise that they want to bring into their classroom, while local community partners indicate the skills and experiences that they want to share. Teachers can find matches and invite community partners as guest speakers, mentors, project collaborators, and more.
Well, my name is Joe. I'm a maker. I'm a bit of an engineer and a bit of an artist. So we make sculptures. We did this for a freeway overpass in San Antonio, Texas. We call it Ballroom Luminoso. You know, I remember all the people who took an extra moment of their lives to show me into their process of thinking, and I found that very valuable. So this is our office. Working with kids brings you back to reality. It brings you back to a less filtered, more immediate type of way of interacting with the world. I think it's valuable to kids to see up close how adults work.
Students really need to be able to see the range of careers that they can get into, and oftentimes teachers don't always know that full range of careers or the pathways to get to those careers. And so Community Share brings in partners who can explain their story. How did they get to where they're at?
So to be able to have the potential of thousands of resource entries like this to serve the thousands of teachers, it's just going to be invaluable. We will be able to truly, for the first time, bring people together from the University of Arizona with the greater K-12 community. That is something that's never been done before and something that needs to start happening. We are living the Community Share is a gift, or as we say in Spanish, un regalo, un gran regalo.
Join the Community Share family today by creating a profile at communityshare.us.
Great, and I'm just going to recap a little bit because I didn't actually have the recording going earlier. So for those people who are watching this post the event, and recently we had over 1,000, so I better get this right, I introduced Stephanie Crewell, principal of Lobethal Lutheran Primary School out there in South Australia, and Yasmin Gregalinis, and they're up on the screen and they're here in person. We're welcoming them as we engage tonight in discussing bringing external expertise and building that rich ecosystem of school personnel and community experts to enrich and allow our learners to thrive and flourish. And then we jumped into the video from a company, and that company was called Community Share, which were originally and still are a big part of the 100 community, as one of the leading innovations across the world. And that was an example of how they build their ecosystem of experts and community associations with the school, and they are able to track it and link it to relevant units of work and episodes to make that learning authentically more meaningful. So thanks all. I just wanted to share that with you. And if any of you want to look that up or get some resources, even meet Josh or something, yell out to me. I did actually ask him whether he wanted to jump on tonight. I'm not sure if he's there. Josh, if you're there, yell out. But I do know it's 2 a.m. in Arizona at the moment, 2:30 a.m. So I don't know if that's high on his priority list at this moment in time, but I know he loves chatting about community share. Mel, tell us a little bit how the rest of the night's going.
Awesome. Well, just a little bit of housekeeping, really important. As we work through the night, we're just going to be asking lots of questions from Yaz and Steph around how they see this partnership working to transform education. But if you have any questions throughout the night that you want to ask, pop them into the chat. I will keep an eye on the chat as well, because if we get common themes or anything come up, I'll try and grab them all together to share with Yaz and Steph. And as well, I guess, always just housekeeping. If you have any technical issues or anything goes on tonight, you need anything, probably right now, take a photo of the screen. So you've got my email and my phone number. I've got it right next to me. If anything happens, you get lost, something happens and you can't get back in or anything like that, please just shout out. But also from what Derek said, no, we are recording. We will send the recording to everyone, and you are then free to obviously share that large and wide. And as Derek said, we've had over 1,000 hits on our last webinar, so we know that this is making impact. So thank you for being a part of that and sharing that with your wider team too.
And as I mentioned before, which I forgot to mention for those people who are watching this post, these episodes are really directed by the Contemporary Learning Framework, which you can access by reaching out to us. But it's basically the elements that go about that we've identified that makes a contemporary school. And the one tonight is about connecting with external communities and cultivating that supported culture through the industry partners, experts, and community, which contemporary schools need to actually nourish effectively. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of questions tonight. And the first one is the why. The why, what is the need? Why is there a need for real world learning? We're going to jump over to some of our guests tonight, Yaz and Steph, and see if they can just elaborate on a little bit about why the need for real world learning. Can we jump to you first, Yaz?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so great to be here. And Steph, I can't wait to hear your perspective on this as someone immersed fully into a school. My perspective is going to come with two lenses. I am a parent of a 17 and an 18-year-old daughter, two daughters, who did not finish school. One left in year 11 at the end of year 11 and couldn't, due to her mental health, and she's very comfortable with me talking about it, finish year 12. And the other had very similar challenges, changed schools after year 10 to go to another school, felt some challenges due to some trauma that she had, and opted out of school. Now, as a parent, you don't expect that. You expect, and I suppose we're trained to think that our children will finish school, but equally, I'm an entrepreneur and have been an entrepreneur for a long time. And now I'm back at an organization that taught me those skills as a young person. I was 21 years old when I started my first real job in a business that is a Queensland founded technology provider who actually integrates technology to schools and educators. We were one of the first in Queensland to integrate it, whiteboards back in the day. And we're talking, early 2000s. But what is really interesting to me is that what was once a traditional classroom has become a community in itself. And the teachers are no longer those scary people standing at the front of class. They connect with you as a human. And I've been able to witness that both sides of the parent and the professional. And what I love most about this is that the real world learning experiences are not necessarily in the textbooks. They are in the feelings and the emotions and the very tears I felt just now watching that video, knowing the life-changing seeds that are being planted in those young people because they're connecting with the community. and not just their educators. They're getting this full, diverse, integrated experience that feels different. And it isn't that traditional point and shoot and learn and consume the content. It's actually this almost this juxtaposition of what we expect a school to be, but actually bringing you the future into the classroom so that you can begin to see yourself in the life of someone else that may or may not have followed that traditional route and are telling you stories. And I've always said, you know, storytelling is our selling, right? If we can tell stories and someone can see a little piece of themselves in you and your experiences, which are often not the show reel experiences that we see today, but the more real experiences of under the hood authenticity and vulnerability, that's when I think we truly connect to the children. And that's when we truly teach them, because their minds and bodies are open to possibility beyond the rote learning of the past.
Beautiful. And Yaz, you connect with learners, students. You also connect with adults and across the many ventures that you had. How responsive are they to listening to the adventure that you bring?
Oh, I think that one of the biggest movers for learning has been in hearing about the things that didn't go right, that are not linear, that are fractured and broken and failing and brink and these breathless moments. And I feel like the more we as leaders and community and educators can show up and not just talk about it's okay to fail, it's where you make your mistakes, but actually tell real world stories of where people have bled. And sometimes in that moment of bleed, it helps a young person in particular, and even the educators, think, oh, I have that same experience, or I have something that I don't know that I'm comfortable to share. And all of a sudden, people become more comfortable and connected, and then they share, and then we solve problems, and then we iterate, and then we learn. And all of a sudden, we've probably learned in a curriculum body of work, not even realizing that we are actually learning. It's real world, real experiences, and allowing students and educators see the tangible impacts of humans showing up as humans.
So true, so true. And they're not going to forget it either.
No, I still remember Serena Russo. I was in year 12 and she came to our high school and she spoke, and I thought, oh my God, this woman is so impressive. And then my first boss was a woman, and I was like, oh my God, this woman is so impressive. And do you know what I've learned decades on is that as a woman that had unknowingly accidental influence from strong women as a 17 and 18-year-old, I can own that I'm a strong woman because I've been taught without even realizing that I was being taught about these strengths that these women who are still at the top of their game. I mean, Kerry, my first boss when I was delivering pizzas, is the CEO of Domino's today for Australia and New Zealand.
Wow.
And she's been there 36 years. And I've only just recently in the last decade or so really connected how much influence those real world experiences had on my education.
Without even knowing at the time. That's amazing.
I had no idea. It was so immersive that it didn't even feel like I was at school.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Yaz, sharing. Steph, you're on the ground. You have a small school, very vibrant school, connected to community. Your role must have so many facets to it, as we talk sometimes. Why do you think there is an essential need for real world learning?
Yeah, so I guess I have a lens of education, and I guess the reason is best practice. It's as simple as that. When learners work with and for others, it builds purpose and belonging, like you spoke about, Yas. And real world learning allow students, I guess, to see what they're doing matters to someone somewhere beyond the classroom. It fosters empathy, which is so important, and community connection. When they engage, they engage deeply when learning connects to life. When it's anchored in their world, they lean in, they ask better questions, they think more critically, they care more deeply. And all that learning, it has to be relevant, engaging and challenging, or it doesn't really matter. And finally, I guess the big thing is learning should matter now, not someday. We shouldn't have to wait until we're adults to feel relevant in our learning. When we connect learning to real life right now, we see transformation. So engagement deepens, curiosity sparks, students begin to see themselves as capable contributors, basically doing learning as we do life.
Excellent, because we want school's somewhat disconnected in terms of modelling life, isn't it? I mean, of course, we need to learn some of the academic and some of the content and theory, but you know, the way that we structure school always gets a lot of criticism because of the last 200 years. We don't just think in silos when we're solving real problems out there. And you know, it is disconnected. School's very much disconnected in terms of what life looks like. But we're going to now, thank you for that, Steph, and we're going to now get on to, and I'll continue with Steph on this one. If we go to the next question, what does, you know, effective school community partnerships or connection to experts, what does it really look like to be really rich?
So I'll give some examples. So we, by accident rather than design, I worked all over Australia. So Mel, you and I both in Mildura for a while. I was in Clare, South Australia, in Adelaide and in Lobethal. And I guess my experience as an educator was very different in all of those settings because the context was different. So I often say the phrase, find your fish. So I'm from Adelaide, I'm from Unley, which is like a part central Adelaide, you know, very city. And then I moved to Mildura, and what mattered to the students was fishing. So Mel would attest to this. They're obsessed with it. They love the river. They really care about the river. And we had a whole bunch of kids who weren't really engaged. They didn't like to learn. They weren't really interested, but they really did care about fishing. And through this love that they had for fishing, we were able to engage. We engaged with Fisheries Victoria and Lower Murray Water and all these things. And the students made an app which taught people about fishing limits and caring for carp. And following that, I always say to people, find your fish. So find that local context, the story, the industry, the landscape that matters to students, that they have stewardship over, where they can make a real difference, because when they see their the learning connected to the real world, they lean in. In Lobethal, it's very different. There's no river. We're in the country and it's surrounded by cows. So we're very intentional about developing partnerships. We're in Cow City, so we have a partnership with local dairy farmers. And how it begins is we meet with them and visit the dairy and meet organisations around dairy farmers. We went to a cheese factory, a whole bunch of stuff, and spoke to these people and inquired into what things their experience of the daily life's like and what problems they have. And in this experience, our learners found out that dairy farmers found it very hard to figure out which cow is which. They had ear tags that fall off, and our learners developed a machine learning AI app that tells which cow is which for the dairy farmers. So you think you come the whole way from dairy farming through to IT. And finally, another example in Lobethal is we had some bushfires that came through and the whole of the hills were wiped out. And our learners, our youngest learners, they were 5, had a relationship with a local community group called the Lobethal Pocket Forest, who worked with them to reinvigorate and rebuild a section of Lobethal. All those things happened because the kids cared about it, it was relevant, and there was a community group who had a real problem that we had empathy for and wanted to solve.
Wow. And you make a great point there. They're real problems and you need to come up with real solutions. So these aren't simulated problems and simulated solutions. The kids are actually contributing to the community.
And the best bit of is that, Derek, that they're really engaged learners. So
Yep.
there's no behavior management. There's no, come to school. This is kids who who are caring about their community and wanting to make a difference. And as a result of learning amazing things, critical thinking and maths and literacy, all those things, but because it's relevant, engaging, authentic, they're happy to take part.
And can you tell me then, do you believe that your school and the community together are a great learning ecosystem?
Certainly. So I would think that many parts of our community make up our school. So we have people part of our aged care community. We have an on-site museum. We have our church. We have our local environmental groups. We have our local dairy groups. And if you think in terms of concentric circles, it gets bigger, but it also gets smaller. So we are one ginormous community working towards one central purpose of to caring for each other and the world.
Do you think your regional status and town gives you an advantage, say, compared to a city school that's trying to build that ecosystem?
I couldn't say, Derek. I will say that definitely it's a very special thing to be part of a rural community, and people do care. I've only ever had my experience for the most part in communities, and I would say people have a heart for their community and they want things to do well. So maybe, I don't know.
Thank you.
Derek, I think it's a point of what Steph just said, really important. People have a heart for their community. And I think if you're in an urban centre watching right now, I'm thinking like I live right now on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, really busy place. But I have a massive heart for where my kids go to school and that community. And so I think we all can have that same beautiful quote that Steph said around that. People do have a heart for your community and your school community. And there is so many, a richness of people and places, spaces that can bring that same kind of ecosystem together for students, no matter where they are.
Well said, Mel.
Yeah.
Yes. Tell us a bit how in your mind about how do you build these effective community partnerships?
Well, I did it once a few years ago. I'll tell you a little story. And we had a school that were really interested in circular economy, and I have a circular economy enterprise. And circular economy it is a really big topic and a really important topic for sustainability and execution over the next 10 years, especially leading into 2032 games here for Brisbane and the Paralympics and Olympics, of course. But more importantly, it's about the utilization of our resources and the dormancy of these items. And the kids from, grade 2 all the way to grade 12 were like, we have so much waste. How can we solve it? And theoretically, it's really easy to model out ideas, but we had these young leaders, they were in year 9, I believe, at the time. As part of their business exposure, they selected my company to come in and practically talk them through what circular economy looked like. And then they engaged in their own take-back scheme at the school that had young people bringing in all these idle assets that they weren't using at home. And instead of just throwing them into bags and sending them off to an op shop, which is a traditional model, they would curate and grade and determine the life cycle of these products and where they would have the biggest impact next. And these beautiful stories and moments came out around the learning of sustainability and circular economy in action, but actually also the impact these valuable items could have. So much so that students weren't just putting their Kmart and Target clothes into their bags and boxes. They were picking their most special pieces so that the story of something important to them could be a gift for somebody else. And I just thought, how is that? Like, not the most amazing thing that you could experience. And even with my own daughter, just the other day, she was saying, Mom, I want to donate some stuff. And I just feel so bad about the things I own some clothes. I've never worn them. And I said the same thing. I said, do you remember that young group of students who had a story about the impact that piece of clothing will have? And we're going to donate it to a shop rather than flip it on Facebook. And you can benefit from Facebook and make $10, $20, $30 or Depop or whatever other platform my daughter uses Depop, I believe. And I said to her, you do not need to invest your time on Depop and hit and hope that you might sell something to mitigate your own risks or guilt that you're feeling right now because you bought something you didn't wear. I said, go back to that story. We made this beautiful video, and I said, go back to the story and think about when you pop that product, that valuable item that's important to you, and you give it to someone else in a store, for example. Think about the story that you pass on, that someone else will today pick that up and say, oh my gosh, I've never would have access to this beautiful product. And they get to then tell that story for the next 3, 5, however many years they might wear it or use it. And so it's actually going all the way back to that community connectedness around not just putting a product into a bag and thinking you did good, but actually handing over a story that is yours. And then it becomes a brand new story for somebody else to bring them that feeling of connection to the community, that feeling of possibility that they can make an impact. And I just feel like, for me, the way we did that, how did we build that effective school community partnership? The school had a problem that they needed to have solved. And instead of trying to go to textbooks and research online, they looked to businesses and people in the community that were doing this and invited us in to be part of their community. And in doing so, I think that we got as much richness of life and learning from it as the students did. And again, it was about the impact rather than necessarily about a curated program of learning. These students just were alive and had ideas that will be future innovations for themselves.
Wow, it's deep and heartfelt, wasn't it, that learning, which means it's going to stick, means it's meaningful, and probably couldn't be done in any other way unless you were involved. And bringing people from the outside and having that stimulus there at the same time. Yeah, I didn't think of that, Yaz, in terms of each student, young person talking about the story that's connected to those items. Is invaluable, isn't it?
And it gave it this interesting, like, some of the young students were then talking about, well, imagine if we built a platform, and imagine if we captured the story, and imagine if we got a video from the person that gave the product away, and imagine if that was a gift with the product and you put QR codes on things, and then the story for the next few decades of a product's life cycle was then known. And you just got to see these wide open eyes, all because the school was comfortable to say, could we integrate a community project into the classroom? And what I love about this, and for those of you who are educators, I work in a large technology company now, and if I got a phone call tomorrow from a school that said, we want our young people to learn about technology, we want them to understand and learn from intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs, we would absolutely open our doors and help design and co-design something that was going to deliver for the educator what they wanted, that still had that real element of practical involvement in learning that doesn't feel like learning. It's community connection.
That's beautiful. Yes. From the any of the people listening at the moment have dropped, if you want to drop in some questions into the chat. Mel, is there any questions there so far? No, that's good. And everyone's intently listening. And it just brought back a story to me too, Yaz, the company you're with at the moment. I remember you guys and some of your predecessors, etc., used to always come on the learning journeys with educators when we would go and visit schools and all that, because they just wanted to be part of the learning. It was a different way of learning too, by going on a overnight tour and sitting down and talking and having a meal and drink together, then visiting schools and then looking at different ways of learning. And they didn't have to do that, but they felt that that was important to understand how learning ticks these days, because they felt themselves all part of the ecosystem, which they were. And it was one of those things where we all learn from each other. What do you think? Let's just recap a bit. This is about enabling schools, educators to foster that and to create that ecosystem where a school is just not bound by its physical boundaries. And it's also more than just inviting one of the parents in because they happen to be a fireman, or they happen to a firey, they happen to be a doctor, or happen to be work in some other industry and just coming in for a bit of a one-off chat. What's some good calls to action that people here tonight can go, yeah, we can start building that ecosystem? And some people here might already have that ecosystem running as well. But a lot of the time, we do have some of those obstacles. I mentioned one earlier tonight. What's some ways to really put in the work so that the return is rich, as some of the examples that you guys are going? Steph?
Okay, I guess start by listening. Tune into your learners and your community who has a passion or a need or a story or a space or a skill to share. Then I guess be visible. You know, I'm heavily into socials, and we share what our learners are doing on socials and newsletters and at community events. And when people will see learning that feels real, they're more likely to say, hey, I want to be a part of that. Be open. Every partnership will look different. Some might be ongoing. Our Pocket Forest one is ongoing. Ours might be a one-off. Both have value. And I guess look outside the box. And work really hard on developing community partnerships. So like you said, Derek, it's not about having a fireman parent come in, or, you know, a vet or a doctor or a dentist come in. It's about developing relationships with community groups and then working on solving world problems, I guess. We just had a parent who did come in who was a chef, talk about bush tucker, and that was great. Okay. However, that has spread out into us engaging with a local group about making a bush tucker garden in Lobethal, writing a book about bush tucker, and it grew bigger and bigger. So there can be, I guess, stepping stones to community partnerships too.
Yeah, no, that's great. And can you tell me from a teacher's point of view, and I know that, you know, you're involved in teaching as well as being the leader and the principal of the school. When teachers are unit planning, what is their, I guess, ways of connecting with community? How do they go about it when they're creating an episode of learning for the young people at your school?
So we would start with student interest, I guess, is how it would start if we're planning a unit. So of course we have the Australian curriculum that we work with, but we have a bit more of a view of a backpack. You know, a backpack is a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to utilise at some point throughout this PBL unit that we're working on. And we have a goal of, you know, kind of where we want to get to for the student learning, I guess. And then we were thinking, well, what's our student interest, what's relevant right now? And then from that, we would think about the partnerships we could develop. So we would obviously, in our rural setting, we'd be able to access local community groups. However, we also would lean on our international community. Derek, I can think of a time where I've had developed a relationship with a New York school, write a story with someone. I would also lean on my independent school community. So I might do a shout out to someone. And also just Mel could be able to talk happily about teacher, colleague to colleague connections that we can make. So I guess it's about fostering every single partnership that you can to find the right one for your learners. Also giving agency to the learners too. If they're the one bringing their passion to you, often they can be the source of the relationship.
Very good. Thank you. Yaz, what's some key takeaways or what's some points of action that people tonight can, and listening to this afterwards, can say, wow, I really need to do the following to get my school on the road of really making the learning rich and making it a whole community experience?
Yeah, I feel that it all starts with not what you do, but who you do it with. And the who you do it with is very values alignment. I sense that whilst someone might be, you know, a bush tucker expert, there was probably a very strong values alignment that then became a force multiplier to get these additional layers of outcomes and education and integration. And I think that if you always start with values, what you're also indirectly teaching, our young people is that you don't have to compromise yourself to do the things you love and to learn the things you're interested in. And in fact, if anything, it might speed up the process for our future graduates, that this is actually what life is about, that it's not the old rote learning, sitting in a classroom, doing as you're told, ticking the box, getting your homework done, and being these linear learners. Now, that suits a percentage of those in your classroom, but for the broader part, it's real world, real life experiences. And for me, it's everything from, I feel like there's so many practical examples I could give you right now. But for me, even as a parent, and if I come in as a professional and a parent, I remember when my daughter was having some challenges in her education. And instead of me just giving up and thinking she's never going to do life, and that was the perspective of her father, and whereas I took a different perspective and connected with the community, connected with the teacher, and had real vulnerable and human conversations with that teacher. And I'll share this magical moment that has to do with everything around community and how you collaborate and the authenticity we spoke about earlier. We can't be afraid to get out of our comfort zones. We all know it's where the magic happens, but actually getting us to go over the edge and step over the comfort and get out of the comfort zone is the hardest thing of all. When I made a phone call to be really open and honest to an educator and said, look, I just don't know how to support her and you, and what do we do, and how do we really bring her through this? And that educator did everything and got her through to year 11 completion, and she couldn't do year 12. But on the final day of year 12, when my daughter felt like a dropout, her words, when she felt like life was just gone for her and that she was never going to be able to connect to community again, she had studied herself for that year 12, gone and done all the CBT and DBT and the therapy and the learning and the education of herself. And she somehow mustered up the courage to, in her casual clothes and in her words, looking like a slob, turned up at her school to celebrate her friends graduating that day. And those girls, I'll just tell you, the community spirit, those girls pulled her into that chanted circle, and she did that year 12 chant as if she graduated. And what she learnt that day is she came home to me and said, Mum, I felt included. The community connection wasn't about the lessons of the classroom. It was about the lessons of life. And our educators, when we're authentic to them and they're authentic to us, and they get to show up beyond their title of teachers, that's when I think the most learning happens. And that lifelong memory of moments that create the magic is sometimes not in the curriculum, and it's in the conversations and the connections and the community. So I say, knock on the doors and ask the people in your community whether or not they're prepared to have the conversations that step you all out of your comfort zone, so that together you can create something that none of us might even realize exists today, but it's the future of education for tomorrow.
Wow, well said, Yaz. What a beautiful story. And what a reminder to educators to not just come as educator, come as real person. You have a lot to offer. Everyone has a lot to offer. And it's sometimes in those moments where the rich learning happens. And it's really authentic, isn't it? Thank you for sharing that. Well, that's been a number of takeaways from there, and it's been inspiring listening to Steph and Yaz tonight as we throw a little bit of discussion around in terms of how do we create that ecosystem, because we know that schools cannot do it effectively by themselves, and particularly when we want to richly develop those skills and dispositions needed for this world or contemporary world. We need to be able to call on experts and people in the community and people with other different types of life experiences so that students get to see what the world is really like and get them to develop those skills so they can actually be successful when they go into life. So thank you again, Steph and Yaz. If there's any questions, Mel will tell us. Yes, Mel.
It's not so much of a question, but I've had someone that's put in the chat something that I might just read out and be interesting to hear, Yaz, Steph, what you think. They're really keen to see students getting involved with real world problems, real world solutions, integrating the learning, locked into that traditional process or the old way of doing school, even. We have a lot of traditions where parents are only interested in results, because that's what we've come from. And we mentioned that before. We only know what school is from when we did school. So there's just a lot of thinking in, it's not really a question, Derek, I guess. So maybe school needs to have an alternate model that presents their intention, negotiates, looks, how do you guys feel, I guess, to put this into a question? It's tough, right? How do we make some subtle shifts? How do we start to help move from a traditional industrial model to a
Good comment.
contemporary model?
Yeah, good comment and question from that, Mel, and good comment from the person that wrote that. Steph, you would have had to bring parents on the journey. Have you got anything to share with that?
So I will say, over the years, I've been teaching for 20 years now, and I have been blessed to have communities that are very supportive. However, every parent wants the best for their child, and I guess some parents do think that potentially a traditional SAGE and a SAGE model is the best for their child. And I think having stats, data, and a little bit of courage is the way to go. We know what best practice is. We know that authentic real world learning is worth it. It builds connection and purpose and capability. And coming tooled with some really good data, with some good research and having those brave conversations is number one. And number two would be, I guess, telling your story. So having a really good, rigorous project that you're working through and sharing not only the action that's taken, but the learning that's hidden underneath that as a layer would be the way to go. And you can see I work really hard as a leader to share that story on my socials and when I'm communicating with parents, engaging parents relevantly and authentically in the same way that I would a student.
Beautiful.
As a leader, I know best practice, so I have confidence. And I know that our school, we just do so well academically as well because our students are engaged learners.
Beautiful. Steph, yes, you were going to say?
Yeah, I love that, Steph. I need to go follow your socials now. And what I love about that is I feel like in that was a story around, or a feeling for me that emerged, like you're educating the parents at the same time as you're educating the students.
Yes.
And I think as a parent that, like I did need to take myself on a transition, that it was going to be completely okay, that I did not need my children to finish school for them to feel worthy. And I've had to almost teach them in an educated way that the framework of what they think is out there in the real world is actually not the real world, and that the real world is the new world of education, and that it will change, and that stories like my children's, I feel like they are young innovators who, and I read Lawrence's comment, I do believe that there's an opportunity to take parents on the journey, to teach them that the classroom is not always the right room for some children to be in, and that we have to be comfortable as parents to not undo the great work that our teachers are doing by having completely opposite conversations of pressure that pushes our children over the edge, when there's educators working so hard to help nurture them when they are in the classroom. And I feel like as parents, if we could just take a different lens around looking at what educators do. Educators in my children's lives saved my children's lives because they showed up as humans, and I ensured that I could be a part of that story rather than go, oh, what do they know? So for me, I think we've got to educate the parents as much as we do the students. And Steph, it feels like you're doing that in the beautiful way through your authentic socials. And I'm definitely going to be a new follower after tonight.
Same.
Well said. And I completely agree. And when I've had been in those situations and talking to a group of parents or talking about contemporary learning or whatever it might be, one of the things that does come out is if they all lots of parents agree that we want our students to be ready for life and to richly develop those contemporary skills and dispositions that are needed. And I've noticed when we've then talked about not their schooling, but we've talked about what are the people like that come and work with you these days in your office as an employer or as an employee or whatever it might be. Do you really want them to have the same type of learning you had, or do you want them to come with initiative, not waiting to be told what to do, to be able to work in teams and all that, which we never had through traditional schooling? And then they say, oh yeah, I do want my son or daughter to actually have those qualities. So maybe I don't exactly want them to be taught the same way I was. So it really comes down to that empathy too sometimes, and really that sort of personal aspect to it as well. But that's beautiful. Well said, you guys. Mel, would you like to show the group that are here tonight and also the post watchers what's coming up?
Oh, sure.
Have
I
I
was like,
jumped
where's
ahead?
Derek going with this?
I
But
know.
now that's just my world, isn't it? Where's Derek going with this? No, all good. Sorry, just moving to the next page. So just a sneak peek, literally kind of finalized this afternoon between Derek and I. But we've had 3 amazing webinars this term to kickstart the year. So thankful for our vast and wide network that is leaning into our little ecosystem here as the collective to support this change. And we're going to continue that in term 2. Dates will be coming out really soon. We will email you all so you can stay abreast and join as well. But we're going to continue on our road with the contemporary learning framework. So a webinar really around learning spaces and how spaces are a part of that. Derek and I were chatting about this afternoon. I was talking about it with the school last week. It's that chicken and egg scenario. Like, where do I start? Do I start with the pedagogy? Do I start with the classroom? Which do I do? Which lever do I pull? So we want to really hear from our real world experts in learning environments, and we've got some great connections there, but also educators and leaders that have played that chicken egg scenario out and be able to give us a little bit of their perspective on how that's gone for them. We want to talk about social equity in schools. It's a big thing around how we can support a space and a community in a contemporary platform. There's so many different ways. We were talking last week with a school that was we were chatting about, and Derek, I can't remember exactly the words they were using, but how they were going to have a dress code that was staff, students, anyone that came onto the campus. There wasn't
Yeah,
a
they were going to have a
difference between.
multi-form.
Yeah, there
I
wasn't
was
a
thinking,
difference between it. And this dream of just having an apparel store like Nike for their school, which just go and pick what apparel you want to wear. Like there's so many innovative,
and the
creative
principle and
ideas.
the principles, Ellie, the principles of, why do we spend so much time on uniform in schools? Why don't we just come as you are, whatever you feel comfortable, as long as it's appropriate? Why in, colonial countries, particularly who've come from a colonial past, have this nature of uniform? We're one of the few countries, and not too many countries in the school actually in the world actually have uniforms, but we do. And then, why do we always have to call our teachers Mr. and Mrs.? I mean, teachers don't find this comfortable. What about just mutual respect? What about and so to establish that social equity, what does it actually mean? And so we'll have some guests from many schools that practice a number of strategies and ways of being that creates that social equity.
That's awesome, Jack. And the last one is and I'll say it's Derek's title, The Bold, the Brave, and the Beautiful. But leading a contemporary school is tough. And that the last question that came today shows that it's not an easy job. And myself, from having been there as a leader in schools, Steph will be able to know this as well. It's not an easy gig. It would be much easier just to do what everyone else has always done. But we know we have this moral imperative to to meet the world where it is. And so we're going to hear from some of our favorite leaders in contemporary education and really pick their brains on what is courageous leadership in contemporary school, what do you need to do, and what is the beautiful part of it. Like, it's not all tough. While we have to get down and dirty in the mud, there is some beautiful moments, and I know Steph has highlighted some of them tonight as well. So that's coming up. We hope you all connect with us and continue on this journey. Our promise is always from the collective. We want to make all this free and available for as many educators as we can. So
thanks, Mel, and stay there, Yaz and Steph. But to everyone who's come tonight, thank you for joining in. You'll get a copy of this resource and video, even though it might be a little bit cut off at the start, but hopefully I've made up there. And any resources connected that we'll share with you. Thank you all for joining tonight and look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.